So the goal behind this guest speaker series is really to share diverse perspectives on land rights issues in India from various stakeholders, including researchers, activists, and government, particularly people who are actually working at the grassroots level. So for those of us who may not know about the Land Rights Initiative, this is CPR's newest initiative, where we are trying to build knowledge on distribution of property and land rights so that we can meaningfully inform the development discourse with the ultimate goal of bringing about development which is socially inclusive, ecologically sustainable, and politically feasible. So our first talk in this speaker series was by Mr. Sagar Rabari, who is Secretary of the Gujarat Khedut Samaj, in April, a recording of which is available on the Land Rights Initiative YouTube page for those of you who may be interested. Today, we are very pleased to have with us Mr. Barun Mitra, Director of the Liberty Institute, which is an independent research think tank dedicated to, in Mr. Mitra's own words, nurturing individual freedom in the economic, political, and social sphere. The Institute has many initiatives. The two major ones include Empowering India and the Right to Property Initiative. Empowering India is focused on empowering citizens with information about political candidates and electoral constituencies. The Right to Property Initiative is one where they, in collaboration with a number of grassroots organizations, the Liberty Institute is seeking to build awareness about capacities of remote rural communities so that they can bring about better implementation of the Forest Rights Act of 2006. Mr. Mitra has published widely on development and environmental issues and spoken extensively about these issues. And his current interest is to explore ways of making public policy proposals politically viable. Today, the plan is to show a short film, and then Mr. Mitra will speak about the grassroots work that they have been doing for enabling implementation of the FRA. Barun, if I may, has had a long association with the Land Rights Initiative. He spoke at the startup conference for our project on land rights in the scheduled areas in January 2014. The conference was sort of trying to look at issues that we are studying in this project, where we are focusing on 3 states. 2 of them are 5th scheduled states, Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat, and the third is the 6th scheduled state, Meghalaya. And we were looking at how land rights in these states are organized and what has, despite the existence of protective legal frameworks, why has there been massive displacement of the most vulnerable communities. The recording of the entire conference, video of the entire conference is also on our YouTube channel, including Barun's talk, which was about the Forest Rights Act implementation in Gujarat. So without further ado, I'll cede the floor to Barun. Once again, welcome, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Namita, and good afternoon. I'm really surprised because this is a room where I've come so often to listen to scholars, and I hardly qualify as one. I'm really surprised also that Namita has called me twice now in one and a half years after the January 2014 conference. And in between, of course, she completed her PhD. I'm nowhere near that. So, so you can see where do I come from. But, one thing that Namita said, which I really believe these days, which is many times we look at policies and make proposals, etc., and think it's a brilliant idea, and then break our heads and tear our hairs because we think no one's listening and it can't be implemented. So this has been one challenge for us as to how do we make our ideas more viable, socially, politically, whichever way. Because after all, ideas are not in ivory towers. And this last 5 years have been really very enriching for some of us because I, for once, got the confidence to break through the ivory tower and go down to the bottom. So, like we say, a picture is a million words. So I'll begin with the film. The film is very new. It's not yet been released, so you are lucky to get a preview of this. This is part of a three episodes, one of which relates to our Forest Rights Act by an American team. They came to India last year and filmed it. So we were virtually participants rather than doing anything with the film because it was their film. I hope you can hear this.
Far from the crowded cities, deep in the forest hills, live India's tribal people.
Tribals are not part of the mainstream society. They have been living in the hills, within the forests, for centuries.
These are people who were seen as encroachers on their own land. For decades or centuries, these people were seen as there but should not have been there. Particularly with the advent of the British colonialism, where the forest and the common land were all kind of claimed as king's property.
For centuries, people lived here with no claim to the land where they gathered food, planted crops, and built their homes. Today, that's changing. Tripti and Ambush have been living and working with tribal villagers for decades, striving to find a way to help them gain legal rights to the land on which they had been living and working for generations.
In 1800, Britishers wanted to take timber from these forests. All of a sudden, people found out that they are now criminals in their own land. That you cannot go to the forest, you cannot cultivate this land belongs to the state, now the British Empire, like that.
In 1947, India gained independence from the British. But the forest lands were not released to the people. Instead, they were taken over by the new government, which managed the land through the Forest Department.
After independence, all these forests become national forests. During 50s and 60s, a lot of tree cutting was done in the forest. And this was done by the Forest Department as part of the regular forest management. They wanted to convert large tracts of forest into plantations.
Local villagers, desperate to eke out a living, began cultivating the land illegally, growing food to feed their families.
Their situation was very bad because they didn't have any legal means of livelihood. Whatever they did to eke out that livelihood, it was considered as criminal. They were considered as thieves in their own land.
Since they had no legal rights, Forest Department officials would try to evict them and sometimes use that as an extortion mechanism. Unless you pay, we are going to send the bulldozer or send the tractor to uproot your crops.
And so, whenever they started cultivating, they were just evicted by the Forest Department. And so that was a very burning problem for them.
There were people who were Indians as citizens, but really didn't have the rights of a citizen. So if you were always under the threat that your crop could be uprooted, then you are going to invest the minimum and you want to extract the maximum as quickly as possible. Because you don't know at which moment the guard might come and extort money or actually demolish. In fact, there have been thousands of people whose houses have been demolished. If you can't invest, you can't increase your productivity.
Villagers were fearful of improving the land, so they had no wells, no tractors, no irrigation. If a forest official was abusive or extorted money, they had nowhere to turn.
By early 2000, the lives of the tribal population in most of India were similar to the poorest of the poor in India.
We came to a couple of villages and we saw their plight. Their situation was just like near starvation. They couldn't get 2 square meals a day. it was not a good situation.
At that time, no one really cared enough to think that there's one category of citizens who are really not enjoying the rights of citizens. And they were too poor, too disorganized to be able to express themselves in a manner that the political society would recognize.
But things did change. As economic reforms were erupting across the country, tribal communities and their advocates began to organize and speak out, laying claim to the lands on which they were living.
People protesting, marching, coming to Delhi. In fact, there was a 1 million men march to Delhi. What dawned on the political establishment was they realized that there is a genuine demand and something has to be done. They didn't suppress it in the way they could have or would have 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago.
Things seemed to change in 2006 when the national government passed the Forest Rights Act, which included a provision for tribal peoples to gain legal rights to their traditional lands. Rama Bai and his family live in Sagai village in the national forests of Gujarat. Rama is a farmer and a tribal leader in the village. But there was a catch. In order to gain ownership of their land, villagers had to prove that they were farming a specific parcel prior to December 31st, 2005.
In situations like these villages, there is no one who's recording who's farming when and how. How would you prove this?
But the application and hand-drawn maps weren't enough. The government insisted on an official paper trail with a history of government-issued documents proving ownership. After a lengthy review process, the government only approved 10% of the applications. It looked like most villagers were back where they started. But then, they came up with a new idea. What if they could use satellite maps to prove that the villagers were cultivating specific plots of land prior to 2006?
So the satellite images of Google Earth was one instrument by which we thought it's possible. So what happened was that archival images became available. So in some places we have images from 2002 and 2004, which means that you get a picture of the history. So if in 2005 you saw this forest, you know this was a forest. If it was an open field, you can see that on the image. So if you see that boundary, there is no way you can deny that this plot was being farmed. And there was no other way to show it in such a dramatic manner as the satellite was.
10-15 people from each village sat around those images, trying to make heads and tails of it. Once they got their bearing, they could identify each person's fields on these images.
The next critical step was to create accurate boundary maps that could be superimposed over the satellite imagery. Small, handheld GPS units provided an easy solution.
You switch it on, get the satellite signal, walk around the perimeter of the field that you want to map. Transfer it to a computer. You'll be able to see the plot boundary on the image and you'll know where it has gone.
And you see what was the condition of this particular piece of land in, say, if the image is of 2005, whether it was under forest or it was under cultivation. You can easily see.
Now, tribal villagers had definitive maps to bolster their applications. With the GPS data in hand, nearly 90% of their applications for legal ownership were approved by the government. Years of hard work had finally paid off.
This technology has really been approved. If the law was passed 10, 20 years ago, these technologies didn't exist. So people would have had to struggle to prove and help implement the law. This was a classic example of how society was mobilized, political sensitization took place, the law got enacted, and the technology converged to help facilitate implement the law.
Now they are no longer encroachers. They are no longer criminals. These people are now very confident that now we own this land. And that has snowballed into so many other things.
મારી જમીન હવે ફંડને નામે કોઈ દો ખેડવા નાખવાનું નથી કોઈને વેચવાનું નથી આપણે પોતે જ મહેનત કરવાની એમાં પાછું જો આપણને જે લાગતો હોય ને થોડુંક શેરા પર હોય કોઈ પણ શાક અથવા આંબો કે કોઈ બી વસ્તુ રોપી દે તેના કરતા થોડું થોડું ધારવાળી કોઈ જમીનમાં તેમાં પણ આંબા ને એમાં કોઈ રોપી દેવાનું નથી. જંગલ ખાતાવાળા ખોદવાના હતા તેમાં સનદ મળી એટલે અમારે તો સનદ મળી ગઈ એટલે કૂવો પેલા આપણને પાણી મળવા માટે ખાતરી કરો નાના કરેલો હમણાં આખા 8-9 કુટુંબ જણ ભેગા થઈને મોટો કૂવો કર્યો છે એમાં હવે લેવલિંગ કરી છે એમાં CPR પડશે આ વર્ષે પહેલા આવેલી તો 10-15 હજાર નીકળાવી.
After 10 years, the situation has dramatically changed. Most of the parents now seek to send their children to good schools. So that is the dramatic change. They are spending lots of rupees on the education of girls also.
And now they have security, so now they can even plan for improving it further, make long-term investments and all those things. But the greatest thing which they feel is that now we can live with dignity. We are getting respect. Because now we are no longer encroachers, or we are no longer illegal lawmakers. So when we are cultivating this land, we can cultivate these lands keeping our heads high.
For the first time they feel as they are true citizens in a democratic country. That they are respected when they go to a government office. They are still poor. Things have not changed here dramatically. You don't see industries or big capital investments. But the sense of pride and dignity is going to last them a lifetime. Thank you very much. I hope I earned my lunch, and we can have a discussion. But this this film was made by a foreign team, and their remit was obviously different from ours, and therefore they have argued the case that or presented it as things have things have changed and changed for good, and that's here to stay. While broadly I agree that things are changing and some of them are going to last significantly, but there are challenges, and I think what I'll share primarily is the challenges that exist and what perhaps we could think of as a way to come out to deal with some of those challenges. But I need to really thank all these people who made these last 5 years so interesting for me. The people, Arch Vahini, whom I know for 30 or 25 years now, they have been pioneering this work in Gujarat. Atlas Foundation is the one who supported this film. The Norman Foundation has been supporting Arch and us for the last 4-5 years in the various grassroots level workshops and training camps that we have organized. PAX and Oxfam, my friend from PAX is here. PAX and Oxfam have introduced us to a lot of community workers and leaders in different states where we hope to take this forward. And lastly, the World Bank, that in the last 6 months had helped us with Ruchika leading a research effort to understand what kind of change can we actually document on the ground subsequently. So there have been a lot of people who have been chipping in their own way with resources or with whatever support they could. I think one key point about the Forest Rights Act, or a couple of points that's important to remember, is that this is perhaps the only time where a historical injustice is being recognized in the law itself. In the preamble to the act itself, it says that it recognizes the historical injustice to the people, to the tribals as well as others who have been traditionally living in forest areas. And as a practical means, it recognizes individual claims of up to 10 acres or 4 hectares for agricultural land. It recognizes habitation and things that go along with habitation, for instance, the school or the primary health center or the road or the electricity poles which are part of the habitation. And thirdly, it recognizes the rights over community resources, which means forest resources primarily, land, water, firewood, grazing land, cultural resources, burial centers or cremation grounds, temples or things of that kind. Finally, the most important and the most new element in this Forest Rights Act is that it has a provision to recognize the right to manage parts of the forest over which they have rights. Like, right is not just that the forest department gives somebody a right to go to the forest and collect firewood or tendupatta or bamboo or whatever things they might be. But as part of the package, they have the right now to decide how to manage their resources so that it becomes sustainable and long term. And of course, there's a lot of gap between what's promised and what's delivered, and we'll come to that. Some broad statistics, I don't think I'll bore you. This is the Government of India. It's February 2005. I'm really surprised that they have not updated it since. But there have been some changes in the sense that Odisha is now number 1 instead of Chhattisgarh in terms of the number of approvals that have come. But you can see these are the states which have done relatively better, and these are the states which the Government of India recently recognized. In fact, earlier this month, the 9 states which have been identified as laggards and have been urged to take up FRA in a more serious manner. And the critical element here is, for instance, Jharkhand, a primarily tribal state, where just 42,000 claims had been filed. Which is unbelievable.
Can you show the previous slide again, please, just for a second?
Yeah, so these are the states that have done relatively better. As you can see that the number of claims are higher in lakhs in each case, and the number of approvals, and this approval has a, this approval number includes both the individual titles as well as the community title, and so does this area. And you can see that there is a problem if you just look at this data. And the government of India has not really broken it up for us to make it more clear, because as you can see, Chhattisgarh is the number one state till very recently, with 3 lakh plus approvals. The area is only 7 lakhs, which means barely 2 acres per person. And this includes whatever CFR or the community rights they have given, which means in effect, the amount of land for which titles have been recognized is probably an acre or less. But they have not yet given a systematic broken down numbers in terms of IFRs and CFRs, so that we can identify the two. And in this case, of course, it's quite obvious that there's serious problem. I mean, very serious problem. These states have not really taken up FRA in any serious manner. So these are the kind of meetings. Somebody was asking me earlier that we are not organizing many things in Delhi. Thanks, Namita, for getting me to Delhi. But this has been the kind of things we have been doing almost every month, more than once, in different parts of the country. The other element of FRA which I really want to highlight, because that is what, in my view, the film also tried to highlight, and we'll end with that, which is the participatory process. This is a law, it's quite, in my mind, actually, it is very similar to the right to information. Right to information, if it is powerful, is only because people have decided to use it. 10 rupees and you can apply. And if you are persistent, you can appeal. And you can go ahead and you can see the enormity of this, of right to information, can be seen in daily headlines as to the amount of, scandals and scams and discrepancies that they have detected. Forest Rights Act, in my view, is very similar, because the law only provides a framework. Who's going to implement it? Typically, a government program requires a large bureaucracy and budget to implement. In this case, just like RTI, people themselves can take it forward. And which, of course, has a downside in the sense of people's capacity to take it forward to that extent, because RTI is also being taken forward by people who have much more access to that in that sense. But the positive side, as I see it, is that had the government really allocated budget and staff to implement it, we would have seen the kind of scandals that we note from NREGA and from many other programs. And because it is not associated with large fund transfer, so corruption has been pretty low scale, which I think is a positive thing, because otherwise you have intrinsic systemic opposition building up to the change. Okay, I already mentioned IFR, CFR, and the challenges and the solutions you partly saw in the film. Let me tell you some of the challenges, because the film showed you some of the positive sides. This is a lady we met last year in Odisha. She's a widow. She received a title as part of Odisha government's efforts in the states, and Odisha is pretty high now, 3.5 lakhs almost recognized. And Odisha is also pretty good in terms of creating that, I don't have a pointer, but you can see the image on the right hand side. That's the coordinates that have been given by the government. And we had a GPS, and this lady, we gave her the GPS and asked her that trace the field where you are currently farming. We discovered, and this was a surprise because I had not discovered this anywhere else earlier, that the plot that she actually said she is farming, her family is farming, and her neighbors affirm that the family is farming on that stretch, and the land for which she's got title is 500 meters apart. And she didn't even know that she's been given title over a piece of land which she didn't claim, she's not cultivating, and which might be with somebody else. What this shows is the enormity of problem and dispute that will arise 5-10 years down the road. There has been no effort, and this is one of the single biggest challenge which I believe that the 9 states that are currently being asked to take it forward would face, which is, if the government looks at it as a distribution of titles, then it's like an entitlement program. The minister and the administration, the collector takes credit that we have distributed so many hundreds or thousands. But if this is the quality of distribution, we are opening ourselves up to an unbelievable challenge in the remotest areas in India. So that, we had that shooting of the two brothers a couple of years ago in Delhi, the Ponti brother, Ponti Chadda, and that was a property dispute, right? We are opening up rural India to this kind of a dispute if we don't resolve this problem. Which is why, to go back to the earlier slide where I said that the point that I wanted to highlight was the participation. That FRA would be powerful, it can really make an impact on abject poverty in India, and I'm convinced about that. But it can do that only if we allow the process that is laid out under FRA to be followed, which is participatory. Complete participation by the community and ownership of the process by the community. Without that, we don't succeed. This is another in Chhattisgarh. Just look at the map on the right. That's the compartment area of the forest in that area, and they have put a red dot, signifying this is your plot. Who on earth can find that red dot on the ground? No one. So this is another level of challenge that we have, that how do we make it happen in the way. I won't go through this. We actually have a website where we process this data. So that's a back-end support we provide to many communities, including our friends at Arch, where the data can be processed and the reports generated, because it does. So the key in our methodology is that the community first must agree that this is something they would like to do. We train the community to use the GPS. We train them how to document it. We are going to help them process the data. They are going to get the printouts. Then they have to fill in the forms, do the legwork, submit, and in many cases, like in case of our friends in Gujarat, to appeal, which can take 1.5 to 2 years or more. And in the slide, I didn't mention it then, but if you see the Gujarat figures, and if you remember the Gujarat figures from 2, 3, 4 years ago, Gujarat has changed from 28,000 in about 2011 to about 72,000. And almost half of it has been through the help of Archvahini, our friends in Gujarat. Not they did it, but so many communities and CSOs have come to them that train us, we'll do it. So this increase has happened because communities have taken the ownership of the whole process. And I think this is critical. Technology is, I said in the film that the technology has converged. And this is actually my learning, which I was telling Namita that I'm going to share after the film. Because when we started, or when I got involved in this 5 years ago, I was enamored by the technology. That here is a miracle technology that can solve the problem. And the technology does help in solving the problem. But the technology will not help in solving the problem unless the community participates. And the empowerment that we are all looking for will not happen unless the community participates. You remember there was a well that was being dug in the film? Yeah, there was a well. That well is being dug with the collaboration of 5-7 families, kutums as they say, relatives. That well is not receiving a single penny from NREGA, which it could have, because under the FRA and under the NREGA, if your title is approved, you get money sanctioned through NREGA to dig wells of this kind, or to level grounds, to remove rocks. But in those villages in Gujarat, and we have seen it in some other places too, people have taken the initiative on their own, because NREGA money nowadays is taking 6-8 months to come, if at all. So if they are going to wait for an approval and then wait for the money, they might have to wait for a long time. So that is, I believe, real empowerment. That people are beginning to sense that this is theirs. So this is the kind of report for the individual claimants. This is the kind for the village. This is in Gujarati because this screenshot is from Gujarat. Okay, this was just last month. Our friend from PAX was here, and thanks to them that we went there. This is a very good example, because one question that came to me and came to many people with whom we have talked about is, how do people resolve disputes? because after all, land is a very emotive issue. And how do you know which boundary is where? This we got, we have been seeing it at many places, but this was the latest, last month actually, demonstration of how communities resolve the dispute if the information is transparent and public. We went to this village, we had been to this village a year ago, and we went to this village again with the maps, the satellite printouts of the maps. Villagers sat around like you see in this picture, and within half an hour, they understood the map, but more importantly, they pointed out one plot, which was problematic. Which was problematic for two reasons. One, it didn't seem on the image that they were farming. And two, somebody else was claiming that it should not have been claimed. And when the people, these villagers as well as some of our group who had been to that village that day, went to the plot, went to the actual site, about 500 meters from where we were sitting. This was a school building where we were sitting. They found that indeed that plot was not being farmed. At least part of that plot was not being farmed. There was a core area which was very small that was being indeed farmed, and there was no dispute about that. But the claim that had been made in the surrounding area was not being farmed, and ultimately even the claimant admitted that they had farmed it only in 2008 or 9. So firstly, it is a violation of FRA, because the FRA will recognize titles only if you were farming or possessing it as of December 2005. So 2008 and 9 doesn't qualify, and that you have claimed more. And there was a third interesting point that came out, that the claimant could have made the claim in the name of the family or the father or the mother, or both. Ideally, the FRA title is joint, father and mother, or the adult couple. The claimant who had made this claim was probably 25 today. So 10 years ago, in 2005, he would have been 15, which means his claim may have been rejected just because he would be seen not as an adult and therefore not legitimate to make a claim. Right? So all these issues which we sitting here would never have known, people themselves came to know and identify and resolved it, so that this claimant at the end of the day said that he's going to leave this claim out. That is that we all think of information as power, and we all believe in transparency. This to me was a demonstration of how information is really power to the poorest corners of India, and how information, if it is transparent, can help them resolve a very basic difference. So this is just one story, the latest one, so it was afresh, and I'm glad that I could share it. This is how the maps, and this was one SDM who had taken us to a village in Madhya Pradesh last year. These are, of course, I don't need to show you the pictures. This is one point which I think is a challenge. That is, while CFR is being recognized in many parts, the quantum has been limited in terms of area, but more interestingly and more importantly, this section 3(1)(I), which is the right to manage, has been hardly ever recognized or granted. Which means this was one which could make FRA a much bigger step forward than what the joint forest management was. Because if you remember the joint forest management, it was supposed to be community and forest department working together. In effect, it was community doing the work for the forest department. Whereas in this section, 3(1)(I), it's actually managed for sustainable use. That forest department, like anybody else, can provide technical inputs as to what is the best way to manage. But the management plans for their areas must be done by the community, and they are the ones who should implement it. And I'll give you an example. This is the latest, again after the film, so it didn't get into the film. This is from about 20 villages in Gujarat. Last year and this year, these villages had got right to sell bamboo. And you can see the total amount earned is probably in how much? 2 crore? 20 crore. in 2 years. Minus the expense, etc., 73 lakhs have been earned by these 15 villages in 2 years. And it has happened, and to me this has two factors which we should remember. One, of course, it has happened because of CFR recognized and all that. Two, this perhaps is the best way we can empower the third tier, because the third tier is completely dependent on resources from the state or from the central projects. If the community can themselves figure out a way to manage their resources well, this is possible that the third tier can stand on its own legs and therefore truly be empowered. Of course, there's a caveat. This figure is very high, and there's a reason for that. Most villages on a normal year will not earn in this scale. The reason being, and I'll give you the reason, this is how they do it. Generally, families put in the labor and do it. This is the reason. Again, I learned last year. Almost exactly a year ago, last June, I was in this village. This is a village where for 15 years, the forest department had not been able to extract any bamboo, because the community and the department were at a loggerhead as to who and how should the bamboo be extracted. Last year, in January, the contract was signed with a paper mill with the agreement of the forest department. And here you can see the forest guard and the village leaders all approving the extraction that is being loaded onto these trucks. But what this guy, the guy next to me on the right hand bottom, he is the representative of the company. And this story came from him, not my friends. He said that in 1995, 96, 97, the intensity of conflict was so great that there was a police firing. And there was cases filed by both sides. The community filed against the forest department filed against the community, and it was a huge logjam in the area. A consequence of that logjam had been that not a single piece of bamboo had been extracted by the forest department from those areas. Today, the company, the forest department and the community are all together signing an agreement and enjoying the benefits without conflict. In fact, it has changed to such an extent that the same company who was accused of being hand in glove with the forest department and getting bamboo at a throwaway price in the earlier days, today has become a singular champion of Forest Rights Act. Because they now feel, there's a paper mill there, they now feel that with the Forest Rights Act they can much more easily and smoothly deal with the communities and get their raw material for their plant, and the community gets their remuneration, and the community is directly negotiated. Like last year they negotiated one price, this year the price increased and they negotiated another one. And this is the other side which again we witnessed this year in Odisha, where CFR title has been granted a year and a half ago, in February of 2014. And the president of the Vanadhikar Committee, the Forest Rights Committee, the man on the right, is sitting there. He didn't know what to do with it. They had not held a single meeting, and he had no clue what this right meant. And this is because this has been distributed as a government program and not owned as a community program. So to me, this is the tragic, because it happened so soon after my visit to Gujarat, when we were getting these kind of numbers and seeing here that nothing has changed. Of course, there are other challenges. There are challenges. One group that's particularly vulnerable and losing out, the PVTGs and the OTFDs, the non-tribals in the forest dwelling. There's been in fact a gross injustice, because the law has a particular criteria for these OTFDs, which says 75 years of residence in the same vicinity, not just in the same place, but in the general area. But this has been interpreted by virtually every revenue and forest department in every district that we have visited. I think except for one officer whom we met last month in Odisha, I have not met a single government functionary at the district and at the state level, at the block level, forest or revenue or tribal welfare, who have not looked at this 75 years as saying 75 years of possession. Who in India, particularly in these remote areas, can show 75 years of possession? That is pre-independence. How is that record ever going to come out? And this has been a singular problem for the OTFDs. Then of course there are quality issues with IFR, CFR, and there are post-title challenges as well. I think I'm coming to an end. Yeah, the post-title challenges, like I said, if the rights itself are restrictive or flawed, we are going to have a conflict later on. And one critical element which is a part of the process issue, and which some subdivisional magistrates and district collectors are beginning to recognize, that is, once you recognize a title, whether it is individual title or a community title, you need to figure out a way to get the community together and tell them what has been recognized, not just distribute the piece of paper. Because then the community can begin to understand what has happened. Because now you distribute a paper, you bus hundreds of people from different villages for the minister to give out the titles, and they go back and nothing happens. Because no one knows, like that widow in Orissa, she had no idea till we found out that the title has been given to a piece of land over which she had no claim. So and the most important perhaps is that even with all the flaws, if a title is not recorded in the revenue records, it's another recipe for future problems. Because the revenue land records are the only records which maintain land records. And unless it is in the revenue record, and I have already met two people who have said that the titles were given in their father's name. Now the father has expired in the last 10 years, and the forest department is asking them to apply again. Why? Because no record exists. If the revenue record, it was logged into the revenue record as to whatever title has been given, the transition would be that much more smoother. Let me end with the empowerment. This has been, again, just last 2-3 months, I think. This is a toilet that's getting built. I mean, these are number of toilets in one village that we saw. When did we visit? April. Again, like the wells, these are being built by the community and the families themselves, their own labor, and you can see the design. You can see the variation in the design. To me, it's amazing that this, the big one on the right-hand top is actually a bathroom and a toilet on two sides, and the center place is a water tank. Because 99% of the time when the Bharat Sarkar or the state government have built these toilets under Swachh Bharat, Nirmal Bharat, whatever, there was no provision for water. As a result, toilets could never be used. I have got probably hundreds of pictures over the last 5 years collected from different villages where non-functional toilets have been built. In this picture, the only one toilet that is functional is this guy standing on the left hand bottom. And he made it functional because after those guys left building it, he completed the rest. Whereas the rest, you can see, they're mostly dilapidated or can't be used. So to me, this is something I learned in the last 2 months. That if you really allow participation, encourage it, people would have their own solutions. I would never have thought of water tank in this situation. Because, we take it for granted. Which one of us would build a toilet without water? But there, you don't have a toilet without water, which means you go to the forest. And which is what we are trying to avoid. So how can you build a toilet without providing water? And this decision was being taken, and this is where, to me, the same story like the well. These people who are building these are spending more than, from 12, 15,000 to 25, 30,000 rupees to build these toilets, which means there's a demand, that there is a recognition of the demand. The only thing that was lacking was the recognition of the titles which would give them the security to invest in this manner. The government of India has programs to build toilets of this kind for 12,000 rupees. And it has now, you can do it, the government can do it in 2 ways. One, it has a contractor who can do it at the district. And 2, it has, in Gujarat also it has the same thing, that that a family, or a community, or a family who has a title can apply to the government saying that we are going to build this toilet. They invest 7,000 rupees, build up to a certain level. The government sends somebody to inspect. They approve. They pay 7,000. Then when it's completed, they approve. They pay another 5,000 to 12,000 rupees. That is the current program that's running in many of these villages. And it's also, some of it also gets tied to the Indira Awas Yojana. But this, the fact that they are willing to invest so much was again an eye-opener for me. That they are willing to invest much beyond what the government program is, just like they are willing to invest in the well without bothering about NREGA. That if only we can secure the title and ensure security of tenure, we have a huge potential to let people bootstrap themselves into a higher level of socio-economic ladders. So this is the last one. This widow in Chhattisgarh, and that's her daughter. She was so proud that she ensured that the title went into the daughter's name as well. Because the daughter and the son-in-law, they are staying with her, and typically in an Indian society, the son or the son-in-law would claim it. And she was so proud to narrate that story to me. This was in Gorela. That she really wanted her daughter not to be left out. So the title now has both their names, so that the son, even if he wants to misuse it, can't really divest of that title so easily. And lastly, this is how got me into the whole story of empowerment. That's in January 2014. The man at the center, I don't know if you can see it, he narrated us. He said, because we asked him that what kind of change do you actually perceive? And he told us that now when they go to a government office, they're treated with a degree of respect and not shooed away as was the custom, and sometimes even offered a glass of water. And in a caste-ridden India, this is sea change. That's empowerment. So, thank you very much.